behind a legacy, such as Nelson Mandela and his fight against the apartheid in South Africa, and others like Maya Angelou and her mesmerizing poetry. But some people don't even know what legacy they have left behind, or how greatly they can change the world. One story that is often overlooked is about a woman named Henrietta Lacks. This poor black woman from the South has changed the world in a surprising way, with her cells being the first ever to reproduce and multiply on their own, becoming the key tool of many medicines and treatments that we all use today. To understand this story, we will first examine the life of Henrietta Lacks until her death, then analyze the many ways her life has affected medicine, and finally, zoom in on the positive and negative legacies her life has left behind. Henrietta Lacks' legacy started and developed out of humble and modest origins. Born in Roanoke, Virginia on August 1st, 1920, Henrietta grew up on the farm with 9 other siblings, and later married her first cousin, David Lacks, in 1941, whom she had 5 children with while running a tobacco plantation. According to the CBS article from March 15, 2010, at the age of 30, Henrietta noticed a sort of knot in her lower abdomen, which was very painful. To finally diagnose and treat the problem, the family traveled 20 miles to the nearest black hospital. There at Johns Hopkins Gynecology Clinic, the knot Henrietta found turned out to be what she feared most: cancer. On January 29, 1951, Lacks was diagnosed with cervical cancer. To treat it, the doctors wheeled her to the operating room, where she was given radium treatment. During the operation, although no one asked for her permission, Dr. Lawrence Wharton Jr., the doctor performing the surgery, took samples of her tissue, which were taken to the lab directed by Dr. George Guy. Little did Dr. Guy or anyone else working in the lab know that these cells were unlike anything they had ever seen before. After Henrietta left the hospital, the cells started multiplying and dividing at a high rate, growing 20 times faster than normal cells. While Henrietta's tumor started to go down in size, in the end, the cancer was too aggressive and continued to spread rapidly throughout her entire abdominal area. Lacks died on October 4th, 1951, at the age of 31. Although Henrietta's life was over, her cells continued to thrive and truly helped ignite a medical revolution impacting millions. The cells that were taken from Henrietta Lacks are known as HeLa cells, taken from the first 2 letters of her first and last name. According to a documentary of Henrietta Lacks by Adam Curtis in 2010, there are now billions of these HeLa cells in laboratories around the world. If massed together, they would weigh 400 times Henrietta's original weight, which is pretty remarkable, considering they were originally a stolen medical heirloom. HeLa cells have been the basis of extensive research in the medical field and have aided in curing many diseases. Smithsonian Magazine, January of 2010, reports that some of over 70,000 uses include the first vaccine for polio, treatments for Parkinson's disease, influenza, leukemia, hemophilia, and have also aided in research for what causes aging. The HeLa cell even aided in the research that led to cloning and gene mapping, and ventured into outer space to study human flesh in zero gravity. Companies have bought millions of these HeLa cells to study possible side effects for their new products. HeLa cells are very unique in how they grow, allowing for these many uses. Wired magazine, published January 25, 2010, explains how scientists know that Henrietta's cervical cancer was caused by HPV, or human papillomavirus, and her cells have multiple copies of the HPV genome. Many researchers wonder if the multiple copies of HPV combined with something in Henrietta's DNA, causing her cells to grow the way they did. Scientists today still can't fully explain why Henrietta's cells grew so powerfully when others did not. It's clear that Henrietta's one-of-a-kind cells have influenced the world, but her story has left both positive and negative legacies behind. With so many uses of the HeLa cell, it would be assumed that her family would receive some credit for it. But according to The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot, published in 2010, Lacks's children hadn't learned that their mother's cells were scattered all over the planet until 1973, when a scientist called to ask for blood samples to study their inherited genes. The New York Times article from August 2013 reports that the family didn't receive any compensation until recently, when the National Institutes of Health came to an agreement with the Lacks family. This agreement doesn't provide the right for potential earnings on future research of Mrs. Lacks' genome, but it does grant them some control over how her genome is used. Henrietta Lacks' story also brings up questions of racism. According to a National Geographic article published August 2013, it is believed that Henrietta and her family weren't actually targets of racism until the 1970s, when her children were asked to aid in research. This is because the scientists grew up in an era of segregation, where they believed that they didn't have to explain procedures to black people. In the 1970s, the laws had changed, but people had not. This makes you wonder, if the Lacks family had been white, would they have been treated differently? Henrietta's story also brings up questions about knowing your own genome. As science and technology improve, scientists can study cells and analyze what potential mutations of diseases you might have. This causes many to question what tests scientists and doctors should conduct and share with us. According to an article in the Huffington Post by Dr. Robert Klitzman in September 2013, the positives of knowing what lies in your DNA could be discovering risk genetic diseases or genes that could be passed down to your children, such as Alzheimer's or autism. However, finding out that you might have breast cancer in the future could cause you to live your life in fear. In addition, the information could cause discrimination from disability or long-term health insurance companies who increasingly ask for the results of genetic tests conducted on a person or his family. Just like Henrietta Lacks' family, many of us will soon be confronted with questions about our own genomes. The story of Henrietta Lacks is a fascinating one, of a poor black woman from the South who has changed the world of modern medicine. By examining her humble life, the huge contribution she made in her death, and the positive and negative implications of her story, it's clear we all leave behind a legacy when we die. Without Henrietta Lacks, life in the medical world and our world today wouldn't be the same, and we wouldn't know of such an amazing story, a story of a woman who left behind a great legacy.